today I'm going to do my August wrap-up. In August, I read a total of 7 books, which is actually a pretty good number of books for me to read in a month. And yeah, let's just get started. First off, I read Ink and Rain, which is the first and second book in the Paper God trilogy by Amanda Sun. And these books are a Japanese paranormal romance which is based off Japanese mythology creatures, which are the kami. And it's about a girl called Katie Green who moves to Japan after her mother dies suddenly to live with her aunt. And basically there she finds in her high school that not everyone is as it seems, and there are the kami, which are mythical Japanese creatures that are connected to ink and drawings and are descendants of Japanese gods. And I rated the first book 3.75 stars. This is the first book that the author ever wrote, and you could really see how the book is divided into 3 parts. The first part wasn't very interesting and I really had to push through it, but I found that the second and the third part of the book, you could see the writer developing her skills. You could really see how the characters start to develop. It gets so much better. So you have to push through the first 150 pages, but it's totally worth it. And I found that it's a very different kind of romance, paranormal romance for me, because how the Japanese culture plays a really big part in the story and affects the characters a lot. Like for Katie, who is a foreigner, she has to learn all this stuff in the Japanese culture, which is really interesting for a reader to read about, especially someone who's never been in Japan like myself. And yeah, I found this book to be okay. It was good, but it wasn't the best. The second book, Rain, I rated 4.5 stars. It was fantastic compared to the first book. I could really, I enjoyed every single part of the book. It was a really good sequel. It went off a week or 2 weeks after Ink stopped. It was really, really good. It was even shorter than the first book, and it was so fast-paced. So many things happened here. Unexpected things happened. I liked how there was more mythology in it, and you didn't know things, and there were tons of plot twists in this book than there was in the first book. And in Rain, it wasn't solely based on the romance as it was in Ink. It was more, you have to save the world and kick ass, and I really liked how the main character developed. You could really feel a development from the first book, the first 100 pages, when she's just this girl who happens to have a crush on the popular guy. Then in the end of Rain, where she totally developed, she became this kick-ass heroine, which is really fun to read about. And yeah, I can't wait for the third book to come out. If I'm not mistaken, it comes out in 2015. So next up, I read Diary of a Mad Diva by Joan Rivers. This book is basically seeing a very long episode of fashion police, except she doesn't just talk about fashion, she talks about everything. It's funny, it's a nice read. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, but of course, considering what this book is about. This is a comedy book. It's here to, to entertain you and make you laugh. It's not supposed to have this very exquisite or very unique story to it. So obviously I rating it differently. If I have to compare it to Ink and Rain, which I read, then it's not on the same scale because it's a different genre. Each book wants to accomplish different things. Next up, I read Fallen Kingdoms and Rebel Spring back to back in 3 days by Morgan Rhodes. Before I started reading Fallen Kingdoms, I knew that everyone was raving about it and that it was a really, really good book. So I did pick this up, but I was really nervous because I do have trouble reading from a couple of perspectives. Sometimes I find either it distracts me a lot and I can't concentrate on what's happening because you keep moving back and forth, or I find that until I get used to one perspective and I get immersed in their story, that you move to another perspective and then you kind of lose interest in the story, which is actually what happened to me with Eldest, which is the second book in Aragon. But I found that Morgan Rhodes did a fantastic job with the perspectives, and I found that she knew exactly when to move from one perspective to a different perspective, so that when there was like an event happening in the kingdoms that this books are about, you got like you got full view from all the different perspectives about this one event. And this book's Fallen Kingdoms and Rebel Springs, Spring, follows 4 characters in a mystical island which is divided into 3 kingdoms. Basically, as the 3 kingdoms are searching for 4 magical items, which are said to be the most powerful magical items, which contains all 4 elements of power. They have elementia, which are basically magic that basically is based on the 4 elements. And I feel like what was really funny with this books is usually when I like one character, even if he goes dark, I still stay and like him. And with this, it didn't happen. The characters that I really liked in the first book, I started hating in the second book, and I really started liking the characters that I didn't connect to in the first book. And yes, it was entertaining, it was action-packed, it's 5 out of 5 stars for both of them. Though after reading the second book, I'm like, this was even better than this, and this for me was 5 out of 5 stars. So like, how can I rate this? It's like 5 out of 5 plus like 100 out of 5. It was, the second book was amazing. I cannot wait for the third book. It's also a good place to start for high fantasy, because I think it's really easy to get into, and it's not that confusing. And so I think that this actually made me excited to want to read more high fantasy books. So this is definitely for people who kind of like want to get into the high fantasy genre, but are kind of scared. I think it's a good place to start. And last but not least, I have the last book, the 7th book that I read, which I have the most to talk about, which is The Merciless by Daniel Vega. I finished this book yesterday actually, and I know that this book got really high reviews, but for me, this was a 3-star book. And let me explain why. As a horror story, solely on the horror aspect, this like, it's not scary, it's creepy, and it's disturbing at times. And I think that as like just the horror aspect was done beautifully well. It did, you know, horrify me. The action, it was definitely action packed, and like kept me wanting to read the book. But especially like a horror book or any book, it's not just that one aspect that makes it unique in the story. For example, this is a horror story, so horror is what makes it unique and what like the author put all her focus on. For me, like a book, it's not just that aspect. You have the characters, you have the plot, you have the plot development, which I think in every other department other than the horror, the author failed with this book. Let me explain. For example, the characters. We have no backstory. It's like the first 4 or 5 chapters before this book, which is basically, you know, you can tell by the cover, exorcism, demons, a group of 4 girls kidnap one girl who they think has the devil in her, and decide that they want to like take her to this basement, lock her up, and do an exorcism on her. Basically, the entire story is about how they're trying to torture the demon out of her and whatever. And I found that, again, the horror aspect was good, but for me, like the characters, there was, first of all, the first 5 chapters didn't contribute to all the other pages at all. I found that the characters had no backstory and no development. The only time we got to like see something about the characters, some backstory or how they're feeling, it was just when the author wanted to show us how psycho they are, like how totally mad and insane they were. Then they'll give us some backstory, but made me feel like the characters weren't developed at all and weren't real. It's like I didn't really care what would happen to them. Again, with the main character too, it's like I found that what really annoyed me, she had no self-instincts to protect herself. Again, there were plot holes. Like, so many times, there were like little like hopes of how the main character Sophia could get away, and then like it will like 60 pages about how like she's trying to get away, which will just, you know, collapse down in like 10 words. which was like really idiotic. Like some of like the hopes or the ways she wanted to like save herself were like totally like popped out of the blue. It was obvious that the author didn't think about it at the beginning of the story because it did not make sense. For example, and this is kind of a spoiler, though it doesn't really ruin the book in my opinion, where she found that one of the characters was actually a drug addict and she had drugs with her. And she apparently had it in the backpack that they had with them. So you're telling me that for like an entire night where they're taking all this torture stuff and the Bible and their things out of the backpack, they did not notice that there's a bottle of pills inside. Like, how is that even possible? Like, everyone was touching that backpack. You would have heard like the pills. Even though all the things did annoy me, I was willing to give this book 4.5 on like just about the horror aspect of it, because you know it really did a good job of making me feel very disturbed and horrified. But the entire book, I was hoping that the author wouldn't do this one plot twist, which was really obvious in my eyes, and I was like, I really appreciate, like, I'll think really highly of the author if she wouldn't go to the cliche place of what happens with girls who kidnap a girl to exorcise, like, and she did that, and which it like killed the book for me, like to the point at the end of the book when I was like, can there be like a freak tornado that comes and kills all the characters and that will be the end? Because that would have been amazing for me. For everyone who liked this book a lot, then I suggest reading Siege by Sarah Musi. It has the exact same horror feeling to it, and it's creepy and it's kind of disturbing at times, and it's graphic. Like there's graphic scenes in here with like violence. But there's character development. There are no plot holes. So yeah, I suggest this for everyone who liked this. That is the end of my August wrap-up. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll have my September TBR up for you guys soon. Bye!